Hey everyone, it's Stacy from My Petite Garden. Welcome back to another video, or welcome if you are new here. I hope everyone is doing well. Today I have a plant vlog video for you. I have quite a bit of daunting plant chores that I need to do, mostly repottings of some of my larger plants that I've been kind of procrastinating on. But now that spring is here, I really want to get these chores done and get ready for spring. I actually have quite a few repots that I need to do for some of my larger plants, but I don't think I can do all of them in one day. So I'll probably split it up. Today I'll do a few plants so I don't get overwhelmed. So let's get started. The first plant that I want to take care of is my reverted philodendron Florida Ghost. It is now just all green, which is fine. I still really like it. It has grown very tall, so I need to extend the stake support that I have here and just kind of fix it up a little bit so that it's standing straight. I know at some point I'm probably going to end up propping it or chopping it and then propping it, but for now I kind of like it like this. It's a little wonky looking. We'll see what happens, but for now I don't want to do anything too drastic. I also think that at some point in the near future, this one is probably going to need a repot very soon as well, but it's not as urgent as some of the other plants that you will see later, so I'm just going to hold off on that for now because I'm not sure what I want to do with this plant in the future. I might want to chop it up, so I'm just going to wait and see. Here are the stake extensions, and I'm just measuring here to see if I need the shorter one or the longer one. I decided to go with the longer one because I think it's growing pretty fast and I don't want to have to extend it again too soon. These are the connecting pieces to the rods. So what you're going to do is just remove the end cap here, and then instead of the end cap, you're going to replace it with the connecting piece. And then you're going to do the same to the stake that's already on the plant. You're going to remove the end cap and then just add on the connecting part. And then you have these little rings here that's going to hold on to the plant and attach it to the stake itself. And it's very easy to use. I really like these stakes because they're just very versatile, and the fact that you can keep extending it so easily and it doesn't take up too much room. So I really like it. The next plant that we are going to take care of is my philodendron glad hands. It looks very similar to the philodendron Florida Ghost, but the leaves are definitely a different shape. It's a little bit less leafy, if that makes any sense. It almost reminds me of the philodendron jobii. Anyways, this one I actually have to repot. It is in dire need of a repotting. And it was very, very difficult to remove this plant from this pot because it was attached. So one thing that I do find a little bit annoying with using terracotta pots is that the roots of the plants tend to attach and latch on to the inside of the terracotta because it's so porous. but that's not enough for me to not use it. So I will deal with it when I come time to repot it. Anyways, you can see here I was struggling quite a bit. I had to just keep digging, and I know I probably damaged some roots, but it's okay. It will recover, and yeah, we'll get this repotted so we'll be happier. I am going to be using a tea bag as a drain cover. Sometimes I use the window screens and sometimes I use tea bags. Either is fine, it's just whatever I have on hand. I always dread doing repottings for my larger plants because I always feel like it's such a huge task. You need a lot of energy and time to handle these plants. I find it more enjoyable repotting smaller plants. I don't know if you guys can relate. I'm also going to fix up the stake for this one as well because it's getting a little droopy, and I think it's because the plant has grown a bit and it needs a little bit more reinforcement. I'm also going to trim off some of these lower older leaves that are on their way out. I am also including some footage of the plant the very next day, so you can see it perked up quite a bit. Okay, back to the past. The last plant that we're going to take care of today is the Matophyllum goldii. So this one really needs a repotting. You can even see some of the aerial roots that started growing in and out of the pot. And I know for a fact that this needs a repotting because every time I water it, the water comes right out the bottom. So I know it's probably not retaining much moisture. I'm going to upgrade it to this pot, and it is quite a bit bigger, so hopefully it's going to be a good size for it to grow into. And if any of you are wondering what's in my potting mix, it is a base of cocoa coir, and then I added some chunky perlite, orchid bark, horticultural charcoal, and then I added some slow release fertilizer pellets. I'm also going to be trimming off some of the chunky aerial roots. I tend to do this if I find that the chunky aerial roots I cannot fit into the pot, or if it's going to be in the way. It's really up to you how you want to handle the aerial roots of your plants, but for me, I am 100% okay with cutting them off. And now I'm just adding back the same top dressing that I originally had on this plant. The next part of this video will be a book chat and catch up on my reading. So if you're interested in that, please stick around. Hey guys, I wanted to share some books that I read up recently with you guys. I haven't read a lot in March. It's been a really rough month. I mentioned in my previous video that my whole family's been sick, so we've been just kind of dealing with that for most of the month. Anyways, I wanted to sit down and just chat with you guys a little bit about some of the books that I did manage to read this month. I think that I might have found my favorite read of the year so far, and it could be my favorite read of the year. I'm just that positive about it. So I will talk to you guys about that one. I have a total of 4 books that I want to talk about today. Well, let's start with the first one is Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganashananthan. If you guys follow the prizes, the Women's Prize specifically, it's a literature prize. This book was the winner of last year's Women's Prize. So I was very intrigued to see what this is about. I don't follow many of the prizes, but I do follow the Women's Prize for literature, especially for fiction. So there's a nonfiction and a fiction list. This is one that I do follow every year, or at least try to follow. There are some very good reads on the list, especially the short list. So this was the winner last year, and I read it. I was like, I get it. I understand why it won. It is such a heartfelt story. The storytelling is unbelievable. I really, really, really enjoyed this book. It was gripping and heartbreaking to say the least. I'm not very good at describing books and what happens in books, but I can tell you the way it makes me feel or made me feel at the moment. And this was one of those books where after I read it, I wanted to do some research and learn more about the subject matter. This book takes place in Sri Lanka, which I honestly know very little about. So I'm going to read to you the synopsis of this book. The story takes place in Jaffna in 1981. That's the beginning of the story. It spans almost the whole decade of the 80s. So 16-year-old Sashi wants to become a doctor, but over the next decade, a vicious civil war tears through her home and her dream spins off course as she sees her 4 beloved brothers and their friend Kay swept up in the mounting violence. Desperate to act, Sashi accepts Kay's invitation to work as a medic at a field hospital for the militant Tamil Tigers, who, following years of state discrimination and violence, are fighting for a separate homeland for Sri Lanka's Tamil minority. But after the Tigers murder one of their teachers, and Indian peacekeepers arrive only to commit further atrocities, Sashi begins to question where she stands. When one of her medical school professors, a Tamil feminist and dissident, invites her to join a secret project documenting human rights violations, she embarks on a dangerous path that will change her forever. This is set during the early years of Sri Lanka's 3-decade civil war. So this is based pretty much on true events that happened in Sri Lanka in the 80s. After I read this book, I myself was really just interested in learning more about the Civil War. I think there are a lot of events and historical events that have happened around the world that a lot of us are probably not aware of. One thing I really like about literary fiction novels is because it brings into light a lot of cultural and social issues that we are probably not aware of that has happened in history. It's probably currently still affecting many. Excellent book. I highly recommend it if you guys are into historical fiction or just literary fiction in general. I think this is a great book to read so that you are aware of these things that have happened in world history. If you guys want to know ratings, I think I rated this a 4.5 stars. Next, I read A Woman Is No Man by Itaf Rum. This was a very highly anticipated book for me. I have really high hopes for it, let's just say, right? The premise of the story itself was wonderful. It's something that definitely needs to be talked about and written about. I love that aspect of it. However, after the first half of the book, it started going downhill for me, and The reason why is because it became very repetitive. The inner monologues of our characters just kind of started repeating the same thing over and over. And in real life, if these people were real, it probably would have happened, because you would tend to overthink and think repeatedly the same things about certain situations. I would say that's realistic in that sense, but as a reader and as you're reading a book and it becomes repetitive, it kind of loses you in a way. So that's kind of sad for me, because I expected this to be a 5-star read, but it didn't pan out for me. So the story of this, it is about a Palestinian family. I think this is more of a generational historical fiction. It talks about the mother, Isra, in the 1990s, coming to America from Palestine as refugees. And then we also get to see the point of view of her daughters in 2008, Brooklyn. So it's kind of like a generational story of how women are seen and treated in Arab culture. It's very eye-opening, even though some of the things I was aware of already, but in general, I didn't know how bad it was. And it's very sad, disheartening to read about some of the things that go on here, especially how young these women are expected to get married and start having kids. And also how men in this culture is seen as more valuable. So if you have a daughter, it's more like you feel like you have a burden that you now need to carry, versus if you had a son, it would be celebrated. And it's funny because as I read this, I kept relating this to my own life and my own culture, because in China, if you guys were not aware, for a long time, there was a one-child policy. When I was born in the 80s, that policy was in effect. And so for a lot of families, you were only allowed to have one child. And if that child turned out to be a girl, you're out of luck, because a male can carry on the family name, carry on the bloodline. And that's just how certain cultures worked, right? Including my own. Nowadays, I feel like we've kind of evolved in that sense where, having a girl or a son is fine. There are still a lot of people who see things as they were back then, which to each their own. If that is what you believe in and you've grown to know, then that's all you know, right? This book also touches upon immigration and how hard it is for people who are not from this country to get adjusted and find their way, find themselves, feel like they belong. The story is pretty much about the women in this Arab family and how they've kind of survived. I don't think they really lived. I think their method of living is just to survive. There are very serious topics here of domestic violence, etc. So just be aware of that if that is a trigger for you. And also other triggers as well. So I definitely would check that before going into this book. The story premise itself, like I mentioned, is very important. And I feel like it definitely hits the nail on the head with that. However, I just think the execution of the story is a little bit it's a little bit off for me. The first half of the book, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. But as we get towards the end, it was just, it got so repetitive. I was like, I get the point, I get it and I appreciate it. But I need something more. I need something to happen. And there were a lot of points in this book that frustrated me. I can't mention specifically what points because that would spoil the book for some of you who want to read it. Overall, I think I gave this a 3.5-star rating. I enjoyed it, at least the first half of the book. I really enjoyed it. But as a whole, I think it didn't hit the mark for me. So I'm sad about that. But nonetheless, it's, again, very important subject matter that is being written about, and I appreciate that. Now, the next book is the one that I am super excited to talk about because this came really unexpectedly for me. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. This book, I tell you, gave me the same feeling that I got when I was reading The Wedding People. And you guys know that was my favorite book of the year last year. And the book I'm talking about is How to Age Disgracefully by Claire Pooley. I loved it. I'll read you the synopsis. Daphne knows that age is just a number. She also knows that society no longer pays her any attention, something she's happy to exploit to help her hide a somewhat checkered past. But finding herself alone on her 70th birthday with only her plants to talk to and neighbors to stalk online, she decides she needs some friends. Joining a senior citizen social club, she's horrified at the expectation that she'll spend her time enduring gentle crafting activities. Thankfully, the other members, including a failed actor addicted to shoplifting and a prolific yarn bomber, agreed. After a tragic accident, the local council threatened to close the club, but they have underestimated the wrong group of pensioners. And with the help of a teenage dad, a few toddlers, and a geriatric orphaned mongrel, the incongruous gang set out to prove it, as long as their past don't catch up with them first. I don't know if you could tell, but this is already the premise of a wonderful story of a found family, and you know I'm a sucker for that. Everything flowed so nicely in this book. There are no plot holes. Everything just flowed so nicely into one another. How everything linked together. I'm like, how does this author's brain work? Because it is absolutely amazing. I loved every moment of reading this. I was in such a book slump this whole month of March. And when I finished reading this, I was so... It felt so good. It felt so good. It was heartwarming, wholesome, and it just proves that, you know, it doesn't matter what age you are. You don't have to stick to the stereotypes. And I want to read the author's note at the end here because I was reading every single page of this book because I didn't want it to finish. I tabbed one of the paragraphs here that the author wrote. She said, I look at my parents in their 80s and their friends, and they're all surfing the internet and traveling the world. They're nothing like the helpless, harmless, older people whom I encounter in novels. It often feels like the only role of a pensioner in fiction is that of a sad, lonely, hopeless technophobe adrift in modern society who is then saved by the kindness of a younger person. Well, bullocks to that, as Daphne might say, that's not the kind of senior I intend to be, nor the one I want to read about. I wanted to create older characters who are bossing it, pensioners who are showing the younger generation how to navigate life rather than vice versa. That this doesn't mean they're perfect or even aspirational. There's nothing more boring than a character without flaws. True. By the time you reach your 8th decade, you're bound to have collected many bad habits along the way, and to have a fair few secrets and regrets in your past, and my characters certainly do. I love that. The way she described her thought behind this. Yeah, like, why are older people that are in fiction novels always the stereotype? The first person that comes to mind is A Man Called Ove, which was an amazing book. I loved it. But that is literally the epiphany of what an older person is expected to be like in a fiction novel. So yeah, if you guys love a heartfelt found family story, you will love this. It's wholesome. It is just wonderful overall, and this could very possibly be my favorite read of this year. I just have a really good feeling. Obviously, I'm expecting and hoping to read a lot of good books this year, but this is one that I will not forget easily. And it's so funny because I ordered this on Blackwell's because I wanted the paperback version, and it was the large print, and guess what? I actually prefer the large print. This helped me so much, and I realized that maybe I need to order a large print for all my books. I'm aging myself, but yeah. I am turning 40 this year, and I think my eyes are starting to go the other direction, maybe. Yeah. And look at the doggy on the cover. Her name is Maggie, and she plays a very important part in this book. But yeah, how cute is that? Oh, love it, love it. Highly recommend. Please do check it out if you guys get a chance. All right, so those are the 3 books that I finished recently. The book that I am currently reading is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. I actually bought this book off of some booktuber recommendations. A few people were talking about it and how great it was and how much they enjoyed it. I didn't know the premise of it when I got it. And then when I went to start reading it, I'm like, is this a fantasy mystery? It is. This is a fantasy mystery. So it's a Holmes and Watson kind of style of mystery, but it takes place in a fantasy world. I just thought that was so unique. So basically, this is a murder mystery that takes place in the fantasy world. And the people who are assigned to investigate it are some very unique characters, I must say. I think that's what makes it so fun, because Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are some very unique characters as well. And I feel like this definitely mimics that. But because it's a fantasy world, it makes things just that much more interesting, because there's a whole different type of world, and the way their world works is so unique. When I started reading this book, it took me a little bit to kind of get into it, because there were a lot of things that I didn't know what they were. Like, I didn't know what what is it called? A Leviathan. That's actually like a sea monster or something. I didn't know what that was. I had to Google it. So that took me a little bit to get into, but once I got the basis of everything and got a hold of what everything means and who everyone was, the story started flying and I could not stop reading it. It is very good. I am now about 150 pages in. I'd say almost halfway through. I cannot stop reading it. I really cannot. It is so good. I could read the synopsis for you guys. In Daritana's grandest mansion, an imperial officer lies dead, killed, to all appearances, when a tree erupted from his body. Even here at the Empire's borders, where contagions abound and the blood of the Leviathans works strange magical changes, it's a death both terrifying and impossible. Assigned to investigate is Anna Delabra, a detective whose reputation for brilliance is matched only by her eccentricities. Rumor has it that she always wears a blindfold and can solve impossible cases without stepping outside her home. At her side is her new assistant, Daniels Coe, magically altered in ways that make him the perfect aid to Anna's brilliance. Din is at turns scandalized, perplexed, and infuriated by his new superior, but as the two close in on a mastermind and Anna makes one startling deduction after the next, he realizes that she is indeed the Empire's greatest detective and wonders how long he can keep his own secrets safe from her piercing intellect. Oh, so good. Yeah, there's a lot that goes on. I don't know what I can and cannot say in order to not ruin it for you guys, but I do recommend you guys read it. And if you are like me, who you are not normally a fantasy reader, you might find the beginning of the story a little bit confusing and take some time to get a hold of, like just settle in a little bit. Give yourself a little bit of time. I'd say probably around like 70 pages in, I started really finding my feet in the story and just understanding what they're talking about, and can now focus on the murder mystery itself. There's so much that goes on. The world itself and the people in it are so interesting, and it's briefly mentioned in the back that people can be altered and in ways where it benefits themselves and the Empire. So that's a very interesting aspect to it. Yeah, so yeah, it's such an interesting story, and I think if you are a fantasy lover, you would love this too. If you are a murder mystery lover, you would love this too. If you love both, this would probably be right up your alley. All right, so that is all the books that I want to talk about today, and I think I'm gonna also end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!